There's a reason that we say that sharing is medicine.
Matter of just sharing what you've got, anyone who's here to listen to you.
Feeling too many things at the same time, and just like that kind of.
Okay, hello everyone. So today we are putting together this panel through Rubik's Counseling Services. My name is Wadat Farhat, and I'm one of the co-founders. And I have Samia here with me. I know you're muted, Samia, so you might want to unmute. That's Samia. And basically, we're an organization that is leading in shifting how mental health services are provided for diverse populations. And we're trying to look at accessibility, cultural responsiveness through education and therapy. And one of the reasons we decided to do this event is because there was a huge ask for it. So we had a lot of our followers and our connections and friends contact us and say they wanted to know what the best way to approach this was, because there's been a lot going on and they're not sure how to stay informed and aware, but also take care of themselves. So that's why today we're tackling this idea of how do I address my well-being while witnessing these injustices.
We also want to begin by recognizing that we live on the unceded and unsurrendered territories of the Algonquin Nation. The Algonquin Nation never signed a treaty or gave their consent for Ottawa to be established here. They continue to be the stewards of this land, which includes the entire watershed of the Kichi-CB, known in English as the Ottawa River. An area the size of Great Britain that includes parts of the lands claimed by both Ontario and Quebec. Any discussion of racism, colonialism, or occupation on these lands must begin with a wholehearted acknowledgement of the Algonquin Nation and its people. The very foundation of our city, the building of the Rideau Canal, was a violent imposition on the Algonquin people. The original source of Ottawa's prosperity, the timber and the lumber trade, was stolen from Algonquin territory even today. Our electricity comes primarily from hydroelectric dams with block Algonquin rivers, destroyed sacred sites, and disrupted the migration of species such as the Pimsy, known in English as the American eel, held dear by Algonquin people. Police on both sides of the river regularly target Algonquin people for violence and suppress Algonquin protests and resistance. Colonialization is not only a historical fact and is certainly not metaphorical or abstract. It is the ongoing lived reality of the nation on whose unceded lands we live and work. We must commit to supporting Algonquin struggles, Algonquin nationhood, and Algonquin presence in real and substantive ways.
Thank you, Samia. So that's something Samia and I have been working on, trying to educate ourselves more and really work on the land acknowledgements whenever we're putting any content out there. We're constantly learning, and this is one of the reasons we think this event particularly is so important. And on that note, why it's important? I think it's always been important, and we've always had this impact on BIPOC communities that we're not always aware of. And I think that's partially because we're just trying to get through the day. We're going day by day, trying to survive. And when you add COVID to the mix, we know that COVID disproportionately impacts BIPOC communities, and the systems themselves that we're struggling in are built on oppression and racism. So because so much of the effect when it comes to mental health isn't from one day, it's not from one event, it's not from what you're seeing or the content you're being exposed to now, it's intergenerational, it's been spanning generations. The impact on you is not something you can really just make sense of by trying to track what you've been through or how bad your experiences really are. So it is your reality, whether you're aware of it or not. And that's why we think this is so important, because the awareness piece we need to be able to attend to our own well-being and our self-care to continue doing the work that we do. So I just wanted to start a little bit with why this is important. And Samia, I'll let you take it from there in terms of what we've seen some people experiencing.
Yeah, so I think it's really important to start by really validating and normalizing what we're experiencing right now in terms of the mixed emotions. We're hearing so many different feelings around what's happening around the world. People are describing it and feeling confused about it. They're talking about feeling guilty, overwhelmed, angry, guilt plays, or shame as well. Guilt is a big one that we hear often, whether that is guilt of not being able to keep up, guilt of not having enough information or knowledge. And we're starting to notice a lot of people being in this loop, especially with social media and how fast social media moves. and how hard it is to really grasp everything that is showing in social media, and not everything in social media is filtered. That is appropriate or is important information or knowledgeable information. Some of the stuff that you see is very hurtful, it's very shameful, it's very inaccurate. And we noticed from a lot of the people that we speak with, it's kind of this conversation about how do I manage watching all of this constantly and feeling so many different emotions, and what do I do with that? So I think that what we really want to do before we kind of start is just introduce, and what I was going to go into, just introduce a little bit of a tool that might help really build our awareness around what we're consuming, how do we take care of ourselves while we're consuming this information, and just attuning to some of our own needs and how to take care of it. As we go through this, and it's constant and it's in your face every single day.
Yeah. Okay. So for the tool, I'm going to use the whiteboard and you guys can let me know what you can see. So the tool we're going to introduce is called Window of Tolerance. And basically it's the concept of each of us having our own window, right? And this window for each of us looks very different. For some people, it's narrower. For other people, it's wider. And that is related to your own experiences and your history. So when there's stress and trauma, often the window will shrink. So how much you can tolerate things kind of changes, where maybe your window goes from this size to a smaller size. And a lot of people have been talking lately about feeling like they're more emotional, they're crying more easily, they aren't able to take on as much as they usually do. And that makes a lot of sense considering everything that's happening. But also we can also expand our windows. So the more we are aware of what we're experiencing and are able to attend to our own needs, our tolerance increases. So the window becomes wider. So the whole concept of the window is when we're inside these 4 lines, it's when we're most functional. So it's when basically, it's not that nothing's happening in your life, there's no distress, but when it is happening, you're able to kind of cope with it and be okay. So it's being alert, but not anxious. And it's being calm, but not like totally shut down. So, and no one goes through this window like straight line. That's not human. We all do kind of a little bit of this. But what we want to watch out for is sometimes we end up either above the window or below the window. And when we're up here, that's what we call hyperarousal. And that is basically when you start feeling more anxious, maybe agitated, it's harder to think straight. Sometimes it feels overwhelming, maybe a little out of control. And this is like your body's reacting. And when this happens, it's harder for us to function and think straight. It's harder for us to do everyday things that we're used to doing. And that feeling kind of takes over of like, okay, my body has taken over, I feel out of control. On the flip side, if we're under the window, that's what we call hypoarousal. And when we're down here, people talk about being more spacey, zoned out, symptoms that we typically associate with depression. Sometimes people talk about being frozen or having no motivation, difficulty getting out of bed. And again, it feels like your body took over. You're trying to be productive, you're trying to function, but it's very, very difficult. So the reason we wanted to introduce this tool is the more we learn how to be aware of where we are in the window, the more we can know what our needs are. Because if I end up here or if I end up down here, it's really hard for me to continue functioning, doing my day-to-day, to continue advocating, to continue raising awareness, or just staying up to date with what's going on. But if I'm aware that, wait a second, I'm starting to get to the top, what do I need to bring myself a little bit lower? Then we can work more on widening that window. My awareness and my tolerance becomes better. So that's why Samia said it's so person specific. So a lot of times people will ask us, what do I do? And I was like, I can't just give you a formula. But if you take this tool and start by working on your awareness, it could be as simple as like starting to plot of like, okay, I noticed that today when I watched that last video on Instagram, I went a little bit higher and I think I'm here right now. And then kind of jotting down, watch the Instagram video. And then maybe after you went on a walk and then you notice, wait a second, I think I'm here now. So maybe you're went on a walk. But if you can really use the window to plot out your own awareness of what's happening and the changes, that's when we can look at, okay, what do I need? And to give you like a general idea of what we need in different places when we're in the window, if you're at the very top, either on the edge or somewhere over here, typically what we need is grounding. So something that will bring us back to the present moment and that's calming to our bodies. So for some people, that's like a breathing exercise, a prayer, going on a walk, being in nature. It looks different for each person. But if you're down here or closer to the bottom of the window, a lot of times what we need is engagement. And when I say engagement, it's not just engaging with anything and anyone, it's more of that concept of connection. So connecting to someone or something that's important to you, whether, again, that can be spirituality, that can be family member, that can be a friend, but we need that engagement and connection in moments like that. So we just introduced this tool so you have an idea of what you could use for yourself as you're kind of going through the content and seeing different things and either reading or trying to educate yourself. This gives you a little bit of a framework of like, okay, how do I know when I need to step back a little bit? What do I need right now? And as I say that, maybe this is something to kind of be conscious of throughout our conversation. It's a heavy topic. It's not easy to talk about. Depending on your own experiences, your triggers, your history, there might be moments where certain emotions come up for you, and that's normal. Each of us has reactions to different things. And I want to make sure that you know that you can take care of yourself during the conversation. So if you're listening and all of a sudden you feel really tight or overwhelmed, feel free to step away from the computer or whatever, like your phones. Feel free to go grab some water, take a break, do whatever you need to take care of you, because we know this topic is very heavy.
There's something in terms of just the window of tolerance, what as you're talking about that. And sometimes, some of these things can show up physically, like physical sensations. As I was reading the acknowledgement at the beginning of just the panel right now, there's a huge lump in my throat. Like, okay, something is showing up for me. And that's a way that maybe you can detect and building your awareness on physical sensations or their specific emotions. For me, that was that. And I'm like, okay, I need to slow down my pace when I'm talking about this because clearly I'm feeling something as I'm saying this. Before moving forward, if you guys want to just take a little break, get a glass of water. I know I need one right now. We also want to just give the opportunity to maybe introduce yourselves just for people to get an idea of what you do, who you are.
I could go. Thank you, Samia and Walat, for this wonderful introduction, for the land acknowledgement, and for this opportunity. My name is Mais Abu Shaban. I'm originally Palestinian, so I'm native to the Palestinian land, but a settler in Canada. And so in part, I'm an immigrant. I came here in 1998, and I currently work for the federal government. I've had experience working in these social services and nonprofits, and it was such a learning opportunity for me to learn about the different adversities and learn about the different services that we offer in Canada in our communities and the power of community. So I'm happy for this opportunity. Thank you again. I'll pass it on to whoever would like to go next.
I can go next. So my name is Sabine Jean. I'm from Haiti, so I am Afro-Caribbean. I've been working for a few years on a mental health affairs. I am a mental health counselor, and I'm very grateful to be here today with you and sharing experiences and knowledge about this topic.
I think it's my turn now.
Yeah.
My name is Elisa Lombard. I am Mi'kmaq from Elsipogtog First Nation in New Brunswick. I'm married to a Nehiyaw man or Cree man from Saskatchewan. So we are in Treaty 6 territory right now. That's where I'm speaking with all of you from, in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. I'm a lawyer. I work in human rights, and also I only represent Indigenous people, so First Nations bands, as well as other Indigenous groups and Indigenous individuals. I'm a mom of two little girls, 2.5 and 4.5. Some of the work that I've done also includes representing Indigenous women with respect to reproductive rights. I'm doing a master's in health law at the University of Ottawa with respect to consent and its accessibility to Indigenous women or its lack thereof.
Thank you. I don't think we can thank you guys enough. We really appreciate you agreeing to do this and being here. And we know how much value this brings to people into the community because we've seen how much it's needed. So I really wanted to thank you before we get started.
All right, so we're just gonna ask a couple of questions and feel free, as we said, like kind of, it's just a conversation that we wanna have. Anybody wants to jump in, feel free to do so. Anybody does not wanna jump in, that's also okay. You want to start off with just asking the question, what comes up for you when you hear the words oppression, systematic racism, and occupation?
I could go first as well. There's a lot in that, I think, and part of it is I find in, let's say, the work environment, sometimes feel burnt out to constantly be the one to identify the systematic racism that's happening, to identify that type of, that we do live in a world that there is oppression, and not even just in like a local context, but globally, especially with the internet and the access to information that we have. I find that there's more and more, especially now with the impacts of the pandemic, distrust in government and distrust in large organizations, because you see all the things that are happening and you're like, what do we do? But in the same time, in parallel, there's trust in people and kind of the trust in the public, because you see the awareness and the education and people wanting to see what they can do. But because of the barriers we're at right now, a lot of them create unity through adversity in a digital perspective, if that makes sense. So what's fantastic about what we have and what we can leverage as minorities, as people dealing with adversity, is be able to share that knowledge and be able to reach out and see who people could connect with to grow that community and to grow that education and awareness. And I think going back to the workplace, there's always these glass ceilings you face, and representation is really important, and representing in whatever it is that you may be doing, whether it's volunteering or whatever it may be. It could be really hard. It's really tough. It's three times as hard usually. So I'll leave it at that. Sorry.
For me, I will say oppression, it's an extreme form of discrimination, if I'm trying to explain how I understand it. Because with discrimination, you have the chance to use maybe laws to defend yourself. With oppression, for me, it's more like you don't even have the opportunity or the chance to use tools to defend yourself, and to overcome the situations. In terms of systemic racism, as the word said it, it's a system. uh, I can say usually there's a confusion related to that, because sometimes we want to, the way we want to explain it is just a person. It's someone, but it's a system. As they establish the system as a way of oppression. At the same time, it's a power dynamic. So you will observe it on healthcare and education and employment, and so many level or aspect of society. So I will say that when we talk about systemic racism, we have to understand it's not someone, but it's more a system. They establish on a way to dominate a certain group. So why I'm saying that, because you can see someone acting a certain way towards you, and you think, oh, this is systemic racism, why it could be prejudice or discrimination. But systemic racism, it's on a macro level where we have institutions that they were not built for certain type of people, and it's impacting us in every level. So the changes, they have to start with this corporate organizations and institutions and basically the government, let's say it this way. That's all for me.
I'll quickly jump in because Sabine kind of mentioned something that sparked something, and the importance of inclusiveness before building anything, before building a program, before building a system, is to include everyone that represents this program that you're going to create. And that speaks volume.
One thing I just quickly wanted to add about, the way that these structures are built to oppress, and I agree with what everyone has said. I remember, and I don't want to really trigger anyone here, but I'm taught to talk about lived experience and processing the lived experience as the way to achieve a lesson or an understanding. And I remember when there was Gerald Stanley's trial here in Saskatchewan for having shot that a young boy, Colton Bushy, in the back of the head while he was almost asleep. And I remember telling my husband, I said, after the verdict was released and he was acquitted, I said, as a lawyer even, I said, the system doesn't work. I said, it's not working. And he said, and he's from here, he said, oh no, it works exactly the way it was designed to work. Mm. And I think that there's something there for us to understand and to grab onto, because I certainly can't speak for anyone else or any other nation or even my own. I don't have that role within my own nation, but as a woman within my nation, like our lives are essentially run by a piece of federal legislation called the Indian Act. It's the only race-based piece of legislation left on the planet. And when our babies are born, we have to send this letter to the federal government and say, give us a number. And then we get a number, 40,000, 1975. 01. It's extremely dehumanizing. And so I think, with respect to that oppression, and from my perspective, the way that I see it is our people are and have always been in the way, in the way of what Canada could be, in the way of what the United States could be. And we're that liability, that constant threat, that legitimate claim to title and rights and resources, et cetera, that other people want. And so we've become the unfortunate, survivors now of many of these policies. And so when we talk about, oppression and discrimination and those kinds of things, it's interesting for me to hear Samia say that she had a frog in her throat when she was doing the land acknowledgement, because I was so happy. I was kind of standing up tall, and, it feels amazing to know that although the Anishinaabe people are not my people, that there's that people see us now a little more, and increasingly so. And so I think for the longest time, that invisibility, that isolation on reserves, et cetera, and Canada's hyper attention towards other situations of oppression that deserve just as much attention was particularly difficult for us, because we would say, for goodness sake, look on your front porch, stop pointing fingers and start doing some work at home. And so those are the kinds of things that come up for me when I think of oppression and discrimination. I don't want to get hyper legalistic about it, because we see it in all respects. It permeates everywhere. And I think that turned the other way, what we see is really a structure of white supremacy that is intended to be the standard. And so anything that falls beneath that, proverbially, must subject to belong. And I think that is really the nub of oppression and instances of discrimination that are incredibly harmful, and, as we've learned too many times, fatal.
Yeah. And what, something kind of stood out to me in like everything you guys said about the impact, like Mice, you said something about like working 3 times as hard. So when you talked a lot about the system and how it's there and it's not easily dismantled. It's not something you can just point at. It's not a person. Elisa, even the idea of being seen. And I wonder how much people are aware that those are probably some of their everyday experiences, because we don't think about it. But those are very common experiences. It's only when
normalized, right?
Yeah.
Like I think we've talked a lot too, whether it's clients or people where they're saying, because it's repetitive every single day that they're experiencing it. And, you know, the impact can be different from person to person, but it becomes normalized.
Just to add something to that, I heard even from clients, let's say they went to an institution and they explained them their situation, and the people are working with them or the employees serving them understand the needs and really want to help them, but they still say, they said they can't. And this person doesn't understand why my pain, you have this empathy for me, you still can't help me. It's because they don't understand it's not the person, it's a system. It's there are rules and policies. Even they have the empathy for you, they understand you, they want to help you, but still they have barriers bigger than them.
Yeah.
I just connected really quickly to, you know, Sabine, what you just said to what Alicia was saying in terms of the when you were talking to your husband, you said the system is flawed. I might have not, it's not maybe not the exact words, but when he responded by saying, no, it's the way that it is, like, or the way that it's, you know, created and developed. That is just like, when you said that, I'm like, oh,
It's true.
right.
I think, well, you can't help but know that, especially, and again, I can't speak for any other group's experience, but I think that there's a lot of common experiences in the way that states may design things to keep certain groups under their thumb. And so I think, you know, as far as Canada is concerned, and this is something that people understand here all too well, you know, like my father-in-law died in prison last summer, you know, and that was not unusual. That's not unusual here. You know, his children now work in the prisons. Like, it's kind of ironic, right? But the level of dysfunction is pretty significant. And I think that it comes from turning certain things inward. I like to say that we're hyper responsible. And I think that that's why we have very high rates of incarceration. It's because, you know, we say, no, we'll plead guilty. Yes, but I stabbed him. It was me. You know, like, you're not going to try to rely on any kind of defense. You're just going to take responsibility and do what you have to do. And that is a value that is very pervasive in Indigenous communities. You don't lie and you don't pretend like you didn't do something. When you did it, you just take responsibility. But the kind of responsibility that is then attributed to that person is very disproportionate considering the circumstances. And Saskatchewan is a jurisdiction that Gladue is a federal court, or sorry, Supreme Court of Canada decision, and it deals with how we have to take into account, you know, an offender's life circumstances before that person is sentenced. And you have to sentence the person, not the offense, right? And so that has become a very, I mean, the Supreme Court has said it twice in 2 separate cases, saying courts have to do this. We need these Gladue reports because we need to understand that people who have experienced systemic discrimination, and in this case in particular Indigenous people, because we're such a high proportion of the carceral population, we have to try to find different ways, right? Because this one doesn't work, right? But Saskatchewan is a jurisdiction that outwardly refuses to do that. And we're talking about their own system. When the Supreme Court tells people you have to do something, you're supposed to do it, right? But still, there's an outward rejection. There's a complete lack of interest in doing that which ought to be done. So when you bring it back and you say, what is the intention? It can't be but what my husband said, because even their own tools are suggesting that they ought to do things differently, and they're not. So it's difficult and it's depressing, and it brings me down to the bottom of the window, which I think is a wonderful tool, by the way, that I'm using and putting on my wall. And I think that within these conversations, we probably flow within that window. We feel hyper anxious, or, you know, we'll feel really, really low, you know, and I think that we have to respect those feelings too, and just kind of take moments to center ourselves and to understand, you know, to humble ourselves in all of this, and understand that we as individual people are really not that important. We're a part of a bigger community and other people who are feeling and doing a lot of the same things, and a lot of challenges and a lot of adversity, and things are getting better. You know, things are getting better. These things, I mean, I'm older, I think, than everybody on this call. These things 20 years ago when I met Samia were not discussed. And I'm sure her and her brother could tell you that I would talk about some of these things, and it would just, most people had no interest in hearing about it. And now it's front and center, but it was in our faces forever.
Yeah.
I have a couple other things to add, as well as you mentioned it, Alyssa, a bit, where you blame it on the individual. There's a reason why you didn't get the job. There's a reason why you weren't able to get into the program. When it's not on the individual, it's a system. And I learned that through my experience, especially now working in innovation, and you get these digital models, or like this automation system, and then you kind of look at it and say, okay, so what are the biases behind this tool? So for instance, let's go back and who created this? And it's this middle-aged 35 or 45-year-old white man. He doesn't know about representation. He doesn't know what it means to so you kind of look at that and you're like, all right, well, we already have 1,000 different issues here before you even test this model, because there's just no one was incorporated in part of this discussion. And that's what I mean when I'm working, when people who are representing in governments or in systems and organizations need to work 3 times as hard, because they need to be the ones who are thinking outside the box. It's not outside the box, just thinking about who else to incorporate in these discussions before you initiate the program or initiate the system, or make individuals feel as if they're the ones that weren't able to get into a certain program, or I guess like the job or whatever it may be. So I think there's power in that, and educating people in that, and making them understand that it's a system error and not the individual, and looking at what you could do to bring that ethics forward, and look at what ethics mean, and how important how an individual feels and what they represent is, and bring that to discussion. It takes a lot of resources to do that, but it's necessary. It has to be like a law of some sort, which isn't.
Yeah. And you know what I'm wondering, because like each of you, I mean, there's an awareness of the system of oppression, of systemic racism, and you're doing the work on the ground. But what's it like for you when you're trying to do the work, but are constantly also bombarded with these images and hearing people's stories, especially from your own communities experiencing it?
It's horrid. Like, I don't know, I'm kind of in the thick of it now, so I guess now is as good of time to talk about it as any. I mean, a couple of weeks ago, we know what we learned. And I don't like social media. I stay away from it on purpose because there's enough drama in my life, and I don't like to pay too much attention to it. But you couldn't hide from that, and who would want to? It's something important for everybody to know. But what it did was pluck a string of very serious collective trauma, and it reverberated. And I think it reverberated beyond even our communities who already knew that this was a thing, and now. So what do we do to? I think you got to slow down. What that was one of the things I had to do, was slow down and understand that you need some time to process. Even my articling principal told me this. He said, don't forget to set aside time in your practice to just think, right? To think through and process, which I'm very bad at doing, but I'm getting better. And this was one of those things where you had to do this. And I think it's important to reach out and do those things that make you feel that I don't know if it's like euphoric, or that thing that just tickles your heart and makes you happy. Like, go do that go do that to balance it out.
Mhm.
Whatever it is, for me, it's swimming. It's like playing with my kids and tickling them and, cold calling old friends I haven't talked to in a while and just seeing their face and understanding. And I guess that is that part of the human connection, right? But in that human connection, I think you have to connect with ourselves and with others who understand us as well. And I think it creates just a more solid foundation. It makes us stand taller and be able to withstand and maybe broaden that window a bit, or at least reinforce it with a triple pane window like what we have here because it's so cold. Yeah, but it's difficult. And I think that constant checking in is really critical. And I mean, for me, antidepressants help. And I won't even lie, on and off for the past 15 years. And to be frank, sometimes when things get just really too hard and that your chemical makeup is going to start doing all kinds of funny things, like it's a good thing to just go see your doctor. That's what I do and say, okay, I might just need a little help over this hump here, and to do what gives you what you need.
As you mentioned, Alyssa, it's the same. It's painful. It really is triggered, and also because you already have. I can speak for myself. A lot of trauma related to the, racism and discrimination. It's like re-traumatizing you again, and it's very, very difficult. It's make you feel powerless. Sometimes, how can I say that? Sometimes hopeless, and it has a huge impact in your mental health. Also, it's dangerous as well because some people, as a mechanism defense, they can emotionally detach themselves from what they are saying or hearing, and be on the bottom of the window. And if they are not aware of that, it could be very dangerous. As a way to help with that, I will say, for me at least, I try to think about what I can control and what I can't. And between what I can control, and I will try to do my best, because as an individual, you have limits fighting against a system, so you don't want to be overwhelmed or to be completely drained by it, even you're feeling it. And this is where I think about steps. Maybe as my level, I can, let's say, call Wala, or let's say call Samia and vent. But together, as let's say, as we are three counselor, mental health psychotherapists, we are doing this this meeting to help as a macro level. So it's step by step that will make me, or if someone felt it could be helpful for them as well, use it to build little by little your sense of doing something and coping with what is happening. But as we know, it is heavy to carry on, and day by day, every day.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think helpless, hopeless, Sabine mentioned, powerless. I would add helpless, frustrated. Samia, you mentioned in the beginning of the session, guilt. I think there is a lot of guilt built into this as well, where it's just like, what is it that I could do? Why am I the one who is safe? Why am I the one who's not experiencing access to lack of water, or feeling dehumanized, or feeling oppressed? it's built up, especially with social media. I've tried to step away from it. I've tried to not share anymore. I always think about, oh, like social media is meant for a specific way where people are supposed to have fun there and share like experiences that are fun, but it's like, I can't look away and I can't not share, because that's the least I can do. And it's just a matter of, if you want to build that platform and you want to listen into my community, digital community, this is what I'm sharing. When I was younger, I was much more active on public platforms where, for instance, like YouTube or Reddit, where you're like communicating with other people and having debates. And I thought that emotionally exhausting, because I was like, there's no way you can change everyone's perspective or make them aware of what's happening. It's a matter of just sharing what you've got. Anyone who's here to listen to you is just going to listen. And as Sabine mentioned, look at what your capacity is, look at what you can do, think small scale, think about even if you look at what you can do in your own local community. Sometimes it's not about being digital. Sometimes it's about volunteering a bit, or taking care of yourself, or taking care of your friends or family. So I found that has been very helpful. But the information overload, not just on what I find impacts me most, but also you keep learning more and more, especially since the pandemic hit, because we're all aware, we're all on screens, and we just keep hearing sad news. We just keep hearing realities. I find I've become more hypersensitized to this information, and also desensitized to the number of people dying, for instance. There's a number of, it's just so funny because there's just those two different dynamics, and there's just like, okay, like what's going on? I think it's okay to feel confused, and I appreciate the framework you presented, or the model you presented, Wella, because it helps me identify like, what is it that I can do, and what is it, how am I feeling about this? And to me, what's worked is having a diary about how do I feel, what works, what doesn't work, how's life been for me? And it's been really interesting, especially again, since the pandemic hit, because I'm like, oh, I'm good, whatever. And now you're kind of seeing that, because we're still into this, that it's been more impactful, and it's become like, these feelings are now normalized. So is that a good thing or not? So, yeah.
Yeah. And I could kind of relate to different parts of what you guys said, because for me, the window became even more important. And I talk about the window with my clients all the time. But with the news lately, and Samia knows this, sometimes I'll wake up and I'll grab my phone and I'll be stuck there for like an hour. And I'll start noticing that either I'm just feeling really, really at the bottom, and I'm just really down, and I don't know how I'm going to get through my day, and I'm thinking about what my schedule is, and I'm just like, I can't move. Or other times where I'm just so angry and I'm frustrated, and I'm trying to figure out what I can do. And I'm thinking more macro, but there's only me, from what Sabine was saying. So it's those moments really where I'm like, whoa, I felt a shift. My window, something changed. I need to break this, because I'm stuck in this loop where I'm going from video to video. I need to share this. I need to talk about this. I can't believe this happened. And especially with social media, I get pulled in. And that, I feel like, has been the hardest thing in terms of like, how do I disconnect, but I want to stay updated? And that's what we've been hearing from people over and over again. So I think everything you guys mentioned in terms of what's in my control, how do I slow down, what things do I enjoy, or that feeling that Alyssa was talking about, and how can I incorporate those? So for me, it's always been like, okay, throw the phone aside, because I need to not look at this. Now, can I attend to myself to figure out where I need to be in this window? And then we'll go from there. And I can revisit the content later. If I need to learn something, if I need to grab a book, if I need to look at what's happening in the news, I can come to it. But right now, it's not the right step. It's not the right time.
May, something that you said was really interesting when you said it's like those two together, like at the bottom, at the top. And I find that really resonates with me, because I feel like just, over the past few weeks, just watching everything that's going on, it's extremes. It's like really down, and like I'm not feeling anything, or that numbness that Sabine was talking about, or like, detachment that tends to happen when you're overwatching and watching all of these things that are, and then a huge jump to the high one where I'm like, I'm posting 1 million miles a minute. I'm, texting people and things like that. And just really trying to understand, first of all, normalizing that for myself, right? Like that kind of makes sense, but be able to, as Edicia was saying, like really slow down because the jump is so extreme, right? It goes from here to like, I'm not feeling anything to like, I'm feeling too many things at the same time, and just like that kind of for myself. So it's not two really extremes that I'm experiencing at the same time. Yeah.
I find it can also be physically disturbing. Like physically, you will feel not like, I don't know if it's like that for anybody else, but like physically you can feel nauseous. I do anyway. And sometimes I'm like, oh, am I hungry? I'll go eat. That'll fix everything.
I do that too.
And I just find there's two things that really help is sometimes like going into something that's a little lighter and trying to find a way to really laugh about something. In our house, we watch a lot of comedy because it just, like we say, laughter is medicine, and I think it is. And so is sharing, you know. There's more space on the outside than there's on the inside. We're also trying to be very mindful of what kind of things we share in front of our kids, because we think it's important to strike a balance between educating them and them being aware and them breaking some cycles. And so it's you got to be honest, you know, when the time is right. And one thing that I found that really helps me, and I don't know if it helps other people, but I'm about to get back into it, is swimming, because it's a thing that you can go as hard as you want, as slow as you want. You can float, you can cry, you don't sweat in there, and there's no noise other than the water, which feels really therapeutic. So that's just one. That is my go-to place for self-care. And you exhaust yourself physically so much that when you come out, like you almost don't have the energy to angst, you know? And I find that because our minds are being stimulated constantly with different issues, you know, when I started seeing things about the Palestinian people, I was like, oh my God, I can't even, like, it was like I was here, right? And you start, I don't know if it's like that for everybody else, but you start to and the similarities, and you start to be severely disturbed by them because they wrap the world around, right? And you say, oh my goodness. And so although we're different, we speak different languages, we have different religions or spiritual systems, there's a lot in our human experience that is rather similar. And I think that those commonalities, those shared experiences, and our ability to increasingly human-splain what we're going through, will ultimately, you know, be very helpful. Because I think, you know, on the one end, there's taking care of our own spirit and ourselves, and on the other end, I found throughout the past few weeks, especially checking in with people and saying, how are you feeling? How are you doing? You know, that's important, you know, I think, because you want to make sure that other people feel supported too. And it gives you the opportunity to vent, right? So you can just kind of have a co-vent.
Moment of connection.
Yeah, that's the connection part. And I think that as human beings, no matter what we believe or where we're from, I think we all long for that. We're fundamentally the same species. And so I think there has to be more of that. It's difficult to do it through screens, but I know that, you know, for example, when you see old friends, there's nothing like, you carry that for like a few weeks now because of the pandemic. Like it lifts your heart for like a while, you know? So I don't know. I just hope it's safe enough for everyone to start seeing each other again, because I feel like with all of this difficult information, those connections will certainly help.
Another that, sorry, go ahead.
No, sorry, Sabine. I'm just going to add on to Alyssa's point, being a Palestinian and seeing, like, especially that the United Nations and Canada doesn't recognize Palestine as a state. I feel like I've lost a lot of my identity, because it's like, I can't tell people I'm Palestinian because there's countries that don't recognize Palestine as a state. So it frustrates me. And I feel so like we're so behind yet so forward. But I look into the Indigenous communities in Canada, and I'm much more forward thinking. I'm saying, We're nowhere near where we should be, but look at where they're at. Look at how resilient they've become. Look at the power they're able to create and demonstrating their culture and being able to push through. And I hope that one day we could pursue into those steps. And as hard as it is to just alleviate some of that pressure and some of that sadness that I feel I'm going through and Palestinian people may be going through, and just hopefully say that there's a light at the end of the tunnel, and just we're all getting there. Just everyone is at a different step and everyone's at a different.
If there's one thing I've learned is you can never look to your oppressor for validity.
Yeah.
ever. That comes from within, but it's also impossible to do when you're in the circumstances that the Palestinian people are as well. It would have been impossible to do for those children who were just found in kamloops, do you understand? And so the resilience plays a big role, but there's also, I think we have to focus outward, because we often turn our pain inward, right? Like that. And that's why we're even having this call. For my understanding, it's like, look in your window, see where you're at. And that pain really comes inward. And I think that we have a lot more of pointing our finger to do these days. And I think that there are movements that are doing that, like Black Lives Matter. And I think, thank goodness, like, I don't know if you all feel it, but I felt like a lifting, like there's like a relief, so that the community doesn't just hold that in themselves, and they put it out and they point to the systems that are doing this harm and they demand those changes. And so I think, but easier said than done when you're dealing with states that are violent and arrogant and self-righteous, right? I'm an honest person, I'm just gonna call it what it is. And the arrogance is extremely flagrant. And I can say there isn't like a day that goes by that I don't think of the Palestinian people. And I think, wow, so similar. Even when I was thinking of doing a master's in law, one of the preeminent legal scholars that I consulted about doing a master's, he said, you should go to the Middle East and you should study that land conflict, because if you can understand that, you can understand anything that's going on here, right? So I thought that was really fascinating. I think we have a lot of, they say unity builds strength, and I think that our unity is right now a little too sparse, but the more we start to see our common experiences, the more I think we'll come together.
Well, I'm just being mindful of time. I know it's also a Saturday, and I feel like I want to say many things, but I feel like if I say them, it's going to take us in different directions, and then we're just going to have like a 3-hour conversation, and then you guys will get mad at me later. But the questions got closed on me, so if you want to kind of just go over the last few ones that I think would be really, really important to touch on in terms of collective wisdom. And
so before we jump into that, I think you guys kind of led us there, because Mason and Alyssa, what you're saying about essentially, because the oppression is ongoing, I really like the pointing that you mentioned, Alyssa, versus the inward, and Mice, just the idea of seeing, it's that human experience, right? You're seeing it happen, you're seeing it's hopeful because you can see the resilience, you can see the action, you can see it happening. And I agree that the unity is slowly coming together. It's still painful. It's a painful process, and it's always going to be, especially when there's no validation. And as much as we can find comfort in getting validation from each other, the systems are what the power imbalance is, like blaringly obvious, right? And like Alyssa said, you can't get the validation from your oppressor. And that's what makes this so difficult, because it's so ongoing. But on that note, kind of trying to tap into that, whether it's like collective wisdom, ancestry, resilience, are there any stories or knowledge that were helpful for you guys that were kind of passed on to you, whether it's by a friend, a community member, an elder, or anyone really?
For us, I will say it's tradition. They always told us that connecting to your ancestry, your tradition will keep you grounded and will give you, how can I say that? Let's say resilience inside of yourself or from within to cope with the reality. Also, a sense of identity, a strong sense of belonging in your community. If it's possible, because we know it's not always possible, if we can have a safe place between ourselves to talk about it and to heal together, because uh, a lot of I'm guessing the community where we come from, community, it's powerful. It's what make the what we are. So they always encourage us to stay close to the community as well.
I'll add on to that, in being that it's really important to know for myself my history, and I was privileged enough to spend time with my grandparents and get to know their history and their experience and get to know more about what Palestine was. And I think getting to know your elders within your communities is really important to me. And yeah, that's a main point for sure. I would start there. That's what built my resiliency, anyways.
Family for us, community, of course. Elders are critical parts of all that, and all of those things lead us to ceremony. And for some people, ceremony can be standing by the water. We have formal ceremonies, we have ceremonies in different kinds of ways. So, but for me, I mean, I know that when you go into a ceremony, sometimes can last a few days, that there's like you shut things off and you let like good things in, and I feel that kind of balances things out. And I expect that, prayer does that for me, smudging, but it's going to be different for everybody. But I think it's the same process, just with different stuff and different words, but I think it's that same connective. And again, it comes back to connection, right? So connecting to things that are much bigger than us and understanding in our humility that we're pretty insignificant in all of this, really. And that what we can do is try to be a, I don't know, try to be strong for ourselves and those who depend on us and those who look up to us and those who rely on us, and most importantly for ourselves, our own health and our own happiness, because there's nothing like that euphoric feeling of happiness, like it's a great thing to chase, to see like a baby giggle, like is a really wonderful feeling, even if it's not your own, maybe more so if it's not your own. I'm joking. But there are things in life that are absolutely euphoric, and I think that we in these times should really be chasing them a little bit more, just to even things out, right? Because I think if we're talking about feeling low, like there's some chemicals at play there, right? So I think we have to rebalance with the kind of chemicals that make us feel light and happy, because at the end of the day, I mean, despite the collective traumas and all the things that we continue to have to fight for, I think the greatest honor we can do our ancestors, ourselves, our families, our communities, is to seize on to a piece of happiness for some time, right? And celebrate who we are instead of fight to be who we are sometimes. So.
I just want to add to what you were saying, Alyssa, the importance of, they teach us as well, the importance of self-love from where we are from. Even we are saying the way they portray us or the horrific things happening now, today's in the world related to us, but continue to love ourselves, love our heritage, what the ancestors have done before for us, our tradition, continue to nourishing that. Even with what is happening, you can feel a certain way about that, because it's the essence of who you really are, and connecting with this part will always give you the resiliency you need to continue living and have and nourishing this happiness Alyssa was saying.
Yeah.
And
And
really, go ahead, Wala.
I was
Okay,
just
go
gonna
ahead.
say, like, you guys basically answered a question we get very, very often of like self-care being selfish, especially during times like these. So as people are hearing about stories of oppression or systemic racism or colonization, it's this idea of like, how could I have the audacity to just talk about my self-care? And you guys summed it up pretty well of like, if I don't really celebrate who I am, if I don't have the self-love, if I don't use those things to kind of solidify my identity and how I navigate all this, then how do I continue?
Yeah.
And you know what? There are pieces of other people that you can, like, it depends, I guess, what kind of place you're coming from, but like the amount of things that I've learned from people who come from different cultures and how they've just like amplified or shined off or dusted off some things I ought to have known but forgot, you know, like it's not you know, like humanity doesn't exist in compartments.
Yeah.
And I think there's a reason that we say that sharing is medicine, because I think the more that we connect and we get to know one another in the way that our respective ancestors thought and the way that they prayed and the way that they believed and the way that they ate, like we're all much wealthier for it. And you know, our conception of wealth is your relations, your family, and the health of those relations, right? Relationships make you wealthy. And so, and I think that that's why oppression is so harmful, because what it does is that it busts those relations apart, right? And so I think the greatest act of rebellion is to forge them even more strongly. Because that's what you do in your bullhead.
I love this piece that, you know, you guys all have touched on in terms of the tradition and Macy said getting to know your elders, right? I think I always see these images, whether like they're on Instagram or other spaces, where you see like the elder and then you see the younger generation, and there's just something beautiful about it when you're seeing in celebrations. Like I've gone with Barat to a couple of the Palestinian celebrations, and you see this generational knowledge, right, on the ground. And there's a lot of love and there's a lot of connection to that. And that fulfills, that nourishes a lot of what we're kind of feeling empty around, right? Yeah. But that really resonated, or the traditional pieces of things that you connect with your family members. Food is a big part, you know, what Easter talk about, how we eat, how we talk, how we say hello, how we connect. Like it's that kind of, I guess it comes back to the same thing that everyone's really saying, is that connecting to something bigger. Yeah. So I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I appreciate the rice with the pine nuts in it. And I don't remember where it comes from, but I know I dream about it.
It's Mendy.
Oh, it's so good.
A Middle Eastern dish. It's where is it from specifically? Actually, I'm not quite sure. Is it Yemeni, I want to say?
I don't know. It's heavenly.
But yeah, it's very yum.
Heavenly. It's really.
Yeah.
We had a friend of my husband's came over. He's Palestinian. He said, "I'm going to cook for you. I'm going to make lamb." So he made lamb, and all kinds of things like lavender. I don't even know what he used. It took forever, but it was, I think, like some of the best food I've ever eaten in my life. Yeah, it's and I think taking time to like care for others in that way too, and show them love, like through acts of service or even words like, "I appreciate you, thank you for doing that." Like, I think caring for each other in the community in this way at this time is really important, and checking in with others and you know, just making them a coffee and bringing them one. Like that can be a very simple act, something you're doing for yourself at the same time anyway. You're not going out of your way, but it lifts someone's heart, you know?
I think, you know, when you said that, Elise, it makes you feel seen. And I feel a lot of the times in BIPOC communities, we feel unseen or we feel invisible, right? So just that act of someone saying, hey, how are you doing? Checking in, coffee, food, connection, it really does make you feel seen.
Mm-hmm. There was a documentary some time ago, and there was an elder in Quebec. He was Anishinaabe, and it was French, but he said, I feel like a ghost on the land. And what he meant was like, I think I understood what he meant was like, nobody sees us. We're like ghosts on the land, you know? And I think that this, you know, recognition, and that ties in, I think, to the very serious issues that Palestinian people are facing and have been facing for far too long, is that need to have your humanity, your inherent humanity recognized on the same level as the people recognize their own, right? You're saying, you don't need to treat me better, just treat me the same as you would your neighbor. I'm not asking for citizen plus, just be citizen decent, you know? And I think that those dimensions of dignity, the more we talk about dignity and the importance of being treated with it, I think the more we see one another, right? And I think Barack Obama said, now this is not a perfect quote, but he said something to the effect of, if we continue to fail to see the dignity in one another, then America is doomed to fail. And I think that that's correct.
Yeah.
You know, human connection comes from that reciprocal recognition of dignity.
Yeah. And I think, like, on that note, a lot of times people ask questions about, like, how do I advocate? What can I do? They're looking for what their contribution is. And I think just those little things that you talked about, where you make someone feel seen, makes the world of a difference.
Passes on.
Yeah.
They'll make someone else feel seen too.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Trickle effect. Yeah.
Dominoes.
Yes.
When I use Alicia and like quote unquote a slogan somewhere. Yeah. No.
I guess, Sammy, I don't know if you have anything to add before we kind of wrap.
No. Yeah, go ahead.
So to kind of summarize, I think we know this is ongoing. It's heavy. It's going to continue to be heavy. You're going to be in different places in your window. You're going to be outside the window. It's the reality. But essentially, you don't have to do it on your own. There is a common human experience. There's a way that we can tackle this within the pain. And it's not about trying to tough it up and just push harder. You need to stop and slow down. You need to notice where you're at. You need to take care of yourself, because that's how you're going to honor who you are. That's how you're going to build a stronger identity. That's how you're going to do the work that you need to do and continue to make each other feel seen. And I think that's kind of what's been going through my head as we talk. And I just wanted to ask if any of you have anything else that you, like a message you wanted to end with, or anything that you want to pass on to people during these times.
Yes, I will say reach out, as everyone said. Talk to people that you feel connected with. And as you are just repeating what you said, that you are not alone, because for my community, every time I'm seeing another community dealing with the situation, for example, what is happening with the Palestinian people, I know the feelings. I know the pain, because we in our community, we experience a different way, different level, but at the same, we are sharing something that we have to, how I can say that, collaborated with each other and be there for each other, because it could be a hope that I have, but I think this way we are moving forward, because we are recognizing each other, and we can together maybe make change happen, because it's different community facing the same issues, and working together we can go through that. And to finish, self-care, as we mentioned, and also seeking help from a professional. If you feel like, okay, I've tried everything that I could, but still, I still need support. So if you feel comfortable and you feel that's something that may help you, maybe as well give it a try. That's all for me. Thank you.
You know, I would say definitely the importance of connection and the importance of self-care. And sometimes it takes a lot of time to identify and realize what it means to find what works for you. There's no such thing as a right way. Sometimes I'm very energetic, full of energy. Sometimes I just scream because I just want to scream, whether it's happy or sad. Swimming, connecting with nature, whatever it may be that works for the individual, and figure out what works, what doesn't, and experiment in that sense. So long as you're safe, yeah.
Thanks.
I'm just looking something up here because I think it's important to share it. So there was a crisis line for residential school survivors, but it's seen quite a bit more activity these days. So the point of that is to make it clear that there is absolutely no shame or weakness in seeking professional help or medication. Well, don't like pill seek, but you know what I mean. If you need medication to deal with what you're going through, there's no shame in that. And frankly, it's shocking that it takes most people, a few really bad bouts before they can get there. And so, I mean, in terms of partying, where if you're at that extreme end of the spectrum and you just feel really conflicted, like, do not even hesitate to go see a doctor and ask them for help. Do not hesitate to call crisis lines if you're feeling any particular way. And if you can, do the things to take care of yourself so that it doesn't get to that point. But sometimes it creeps up on us. It's crept up on me, crept up on most of the people I know. And when you're not minding your window because you're looking away too often, then that can happen. And so just speaking to that extreme, if you're there, don't ever hesitate. You need a lot of strength to reach out to get help. And let me tell you, it's worth it, because the relief comes in as soon as you're able to get what you need in that moment.
Yeah, no, a lot of the questions that were asked today, there's like, I could ramble on about it and talk about it for hours. And the other thing is, one of them was like, how do you take care of yourself within the barriers you're currently facing, and what can you do within your limits? So for instance, I wanted to care for something. I couldn't have a pet because I'm living with home, and there's some people who have allergies, and I wasn't able to go out, and I started investing in plants and taking care of plants. And I find so much more meaning in that as well. So definitely something that worked for me a lot.
I love that. Mason, I just message you and be like, please give me some tips on how to keep mine alive.
Samia and I don't know how to keep plants alive, but
I swear I'm trying. I speak to the plant. I'm like, what do you need from me today? I've tried everything, but yeah.
So send me pictures and be like, what do you think I should do? I'm like, you're asking the wrong person. But ever since COVID, there's been something about, like, I have this plant, and it's, I think, the only one that's still alive. And I think it's resilient. I don't think it's me. But there's something about plants and caring for them during COVID that I found really helpful too. And I'm trying to get better at it. Like, I'm asking people that have greener thumbs, I guess. I don't know. But yeah, plants, I think, are a big one. Just the greenery itself for me, like having green around.
Cleans your air too. It's good for you.
Yeah.
I just want to share I don't know who's going to be watching this, but there's a line for the National Indian Residential School Crisis Line. It's been set up to provide support to former students and those affected, so they can access emotional and crisis referral services by calling a 24-hour national crisis line, which is 1-866-925-4419. I always like to do that just in case.
Yeah. If you guys have any resources that you would love to share, please send us an email with them and we'll put them up, because I think that's really, really important. We have some, but there's so many out there. And if you have connected to some that are really helpful and people have been using it, please share it. And we'll be posting that. Thank you guys. Really, honestly, thank you so much for being here today on a Saturday, and hopefully we'll be able to connect soon.
Yes.
I feel like it was a therapy.
Everyone, take care.
Have a good weekend, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Hi guys, I hope that you guys have enjoyed the panel as much as we did. We're very aware that it was a very important topic, but also a very heavy one.
Yeah.
So there was a lot discussed there, a lot to kind of reflect on. And I think we just wanted to hop on here and talk a little bit about how to ground ourselves as we're having these conversations. And I think, over the weekend, you and I have talked a little bit about feeling a certain way.
Yeah, I think like right after it ended, we did realize that we were like a little maybe irritated, not sure what to do with ourselves, feeling a little down, or just kind of wanting to not do much. So we want to normalize that. If that's what you're feeling, then it might just be from the heaviness of the topic and what was discussed. It might be helpful to take a moment and just like sit down and write down what you're feeling, whether it's like emotions or physical sensations, just to give yourself some time to actually sit with it. And then from there, kind of looking at what's helpful for you, what helps you stay in the present moment, what helps calm you down or ground you.
Yeah, so bringing yourself back into the present, because I know that our brains can take us very different places. Some of the things that's really helped us, and part of why we're here in this area, is because we wanted to really talk about nature and how grounding it is and how we connect to it. So if there's something that you can connect to as well that is that helps you ground, that helps you calm your nervous system down, then we would encourage you and invite you to do so.
Yeah, so whether that's like reaching out to someone, the resources below that we've included, being in nature, faith, certain traditions or rituals like we mentioned in the video, just giving yourself the time and realizing that it's okay that you feel this way kind of actually makes sense.
Yeah. Please be kind to yourselves as you are going through this, as you're reflecting on this, and we hope that it helped.